live. So I would love to say next live in the series, but let's be honest, we're just kind of winging it. But I mean, at the same time, I'm also taking, ideas from you all. In fact, today is about taking ideas from somebody here, and actually a client of mine who's pretty awesome. So, okay. So when I am met with questions, okay, well, I'm gonna tell you where I go, okay? So I'm a postmodern kind of like academic lecturer, all of this kind of stuff, right? So postmodernism really is, in short, an idea, a philosophy, a view of the world that says, listen, there's nothing natural to the world, there's nothing inherent to the world, there's nothing in terms of the rules, laws, or anything that we think, even laws, as in scientific laws. I'm saying this as a scientist, right? That we are not agreeing to. Meaning, and I mean, you can see this, even scientific laws, right? Galileo challenged a scientific law. Why? Because we're constantly learning. We're constantly growing. We're constantly shifting the way in which we see the lens called reality. Okay, so when somebody asks me this question, okay, about can I use faith to, or how to use faith to manifest the impossible? Okay, well, I think of a few things, because the problem is, I think most people, when they use the word impossible, they go scientific with it, right? They're thinking like gravity, or they're thinking like, and the major problem is, by the way, is that when you think of impossible, like we've been taught to think of gravity, and gravity itself and the science of gravity is also being challenged, right? And it's constantly changing, like I just said at the beginning of this. Why? Because our knowledge of it. So let me just say a different way of that. Our experience of gravity is changing because our experience of gravity is changing, okay? That means the way we see things, the way we think we know things is always in flux, okay? So you need to hear this, because when most people hear the word impossible, they are trying to take what and make a word into something that's scientific, like the word impossible, right? Hello. And they're trying to take an idea like getting money as impossible, right? And they're trying to make it into a scientific law, or they're trying to say, why is it impossible to get confidence? So what they've done is they've shifted, because again, like I said, if you're just jumping on, the way in which people use the word impossible is the way in which people talk about gravity, or the way in which people use the word impossible is the way people talk about like the laws of nature, as if they're unchanging. Here's the thing, the laws of nature are always changing, right? You ask a meteorologist that question, and they'll be like, of course, the laws of nature are always changing. And you even ask somebody who studies quantum physics, or even Carlos Rovelli, who I read quite a bit, a quantum theorist, right? If the laws of gravity are changing. Yes, because our knowledge of it is changing, right? And people love to challenge that. And it's like, why would you want to challenge something that is inherently not static, right? It's always changing. And so why? Because, and I'll tell you why. And yes, I'm going to answer this question, but you know me, I need to go back to origins for you to understand why I come to where I come to, right? In the way in which I understand all of these things. So when you are trying to grasp what the impossible is, you have to ask, why do you think it's impossible, right? Because again, you've just turned something that isn't impossible into a scientific law. And remember, I don't agree with scientific laws, right? Thermodynamics, all this kind of stuff. Yes, those things do happen, but our knowledge of them is constantly changing, which really does mean that not just our knowledge is changing, but our experience of that idea is changing, okay? Which experience should be changeable. That means when you're trying to lock in and say, this is something impossible and I can't manifest it, right? What you're saying is there are laws that are more powerful than you, okay? And yet that means also, first and foremost, you don't believe you're God. You don't believe that there is a divine component to you that you call the inner self. You've given that up 100%. As soon as you throw in the word impossible, you've given up any possibility to accept another possibility as well, right? So what you've done is there's like basically every day, right? You have a multiplicity, which means just ongoing amounts of possible things that could happen. But then when you say this is impossible, what you've done is you've collapsed it. Like, let's just say there's hundreds. So you went from 100 different possibilities to the one. And I don't know if it makes that sound, but let's just imagine it does, right? So, you've just collapsed all of this. By using the word impossible, you've collapsed all possibility and said, there is one. That's a little different sound if you didn't notice. But I mean, basically, you've limited yourself, okay? And because you've turned like getting money, or getting an SP back, or getting a house, or going through escrow, like escrow, or getting your parents to say I love you, whatever it is, and you start telling the story of how they're impossible and they're never going to change, and how they're so sold in their own ways, or whatever it is. What you've done is you've taken all possibilities of that person being anything other than what they are now into collapsing them into this one. Right, which is what you're experiencing. So then when you keep telling the story of who this person is, and by the way, the person that you could be telling the story about is yourself as well, right? Because what you're doing is when you say this person is really, heavy-handed, or my parents were this way when I grew up, and that's it. And you keep telling that story. Maybe you even sold books off of this. Maybe you even become famous off the back of this trauma, whatever it is. So what you do then, you don't just create a version of them that never changes, you create a version of yourself that never changes. So people tend to forget this, right? So then what has to happen is when you're telling a story of, like, let's say abusive parents or whatever it is, and by the way, they have their own responsibility. They need to take their own responsibility. People have their own choices. They are divine. Everybody's divine. We get this. That's why we all have imagination. But that does not mean, and I see too many people in manifestation circles, Neville Goddard circles, who are like, no, it's all you. Yeah, I get that. It is all you in terms of how they're reflecting, but they themselves also have their own worldviews, right? And they experience what they reflect, okay? So then, for example, if they think the world is something to fear and they treat you like you're something to fear, guess what? They're experiencing their own body of beliefs, their own states, right? So we need to get this idea from, well, you know what? If my spouse is abusing me, well, then it's all on me. No, whatsoever. I don't think Neville would ever agree to anything like that. Or if anybody really truly believed what he meant, or anybody for that matter who claims that the world is a mirror, right, would ever agree that it's okay for that to happen. It's not okay. And you need to leave that situation immediately, right? But what I do want to get at, though, is that when you hold people in certain positions, and when I say people, use anything. Use a house, use money, use confidence, when you hold anybody in a certain limited capacity of saying, this is the way that this person is, this is the way money is, this is the way a car is, this is the way things are, right? Then you start telling the story, not of just that object, that thing, that event. You then tell the story of you in connection to that event. So then if you have abusive parents and you keep telling that story, and I'm not saying that you necessarily need to, actually, we're going to talk about that in a different one, but to forgive is to forget, by the way, according to Neville. But what you do is you end up creating a person who needs to be the victim all of the time. So then you're constantly looking at the story that you're telling about other people through the lens of a very limited lens, by the way. But and what that limited lens of seeing them as a certain person is that it makes you a limited person, because you can only react to the story that you're telling about them to yourself, right? So again, if you look at a situation, and your boss is a jerk, and you keep telling the story of how your boss is a jerk and they withhold money and all this kind of stuff, guess what? You've limited not just them, you've limited yourself, and you've limited your capacity to change. You've limited their capacity to change. So how do you actually do it? Well, you start holding them in your mind with a different image by controlling your inner conversations, right? And you give them a different way of being, because there's thousands of versions of us, right? This is like the multiverse. And so, but the multiverse is mental, not physical. Right? And so even Neville actually talks about this in his book, Out of This World, right? in that we need to think of the imagination as if you've entered a different world, a different realm, right? And you're entering, like, for example, when in the book of John, where Jesus says, I go to prepare a place for you, and there's many mansions. The many mansions are the many states, but I like to even go deeper than that and to say that there are many universes, right? And so there are many universes and many versions of yourself, right, that actually exist that you can access any time of any day, right? You don't have to wait till bedtime. You don't have to wait till the morning. You don't have to wait till groggy states. Any of that, you can access it now. This is why Neville says you can change your state in a twinkling of an eye, right? And that's so true. And again, doubt doesn't have to play a part. That's only you giving doubt way more focus than it really deserves, okay? But can you, and I'm going to keep coming back to this question because I want this to be the focus, and I'm eventually going to answer this, but I need you to hear that when you start calling things impossible, you're now aligning that with like what we get taught at a very young age about scientific laws. Don't challenge them. You just can't challenge it, right? That's just the way it is. Do you get what I'm saying? And so I really, really want you to be aware of what the word impossible means. So when it says with God, all things are possible, right? With God, all things are possible. What that means is with the imagination, you can do anything. But here's the thing, people hear that and I think what's happened is people have heard that too much, okay? But then you have to bring in faith. Okay. Now, if you look up faith, it's a very interesting word. In the Hebrew, it's emunya, right? E-M-U-N-A-H. Okay. And it's multi-layered. Like anything in Hebrew, any word that you run into in scripture is multi-layered. I mean, there are words that have like 18 different meanings depending upon the context. And that's just one word. Okay. Like the word glory has up to 12, right? And so emunya is which is the word for faith, right? Because the question that this client asked me is, can I use faith, right? And so again, yes, you can. And I mean, obviously that's my answer to that question, but I'm gonna show you how. Because what happens though, is that if you believe that faith is powerful enough, then there is no such thing as possible. So then that's yet another component that you need to be aware of. If you're asking the question, always figure out, always deep dive, why am I asking this question? What's the fundamental heart behind what is driving me to ask this question? Because if you piece together the word faith in the same sentence as impossible, then you're not really understanding what faith is, right? Because faith is beyond the impossible. Because faith is conviction. Right? That's really, really what faith is better understood as, is a deep-seated conviction. And again, feel free to fact check me. I really want you to. There's like 4 different levels to this, but like there's a verse in Exodus that essentially says like, we will do this, and by doing this, we will understand. Right? And that is faith. That's ultimately, and you know, for the Hebrew mind, it included, like, for example, deep diving into the Torah and all this kind of stuff. But the Torah is just a metaphor, right, for understanding your mind. Okay, the Torah is just a metaphor for the mind. And so it's always committing to the process. But also emunya in the Hebrew is a process. We think I need to have enough faith. Like, so we think like faith is hey, is your cup half full? Is your cup half empty? Right? We think it's about positivity, and faith isn't positivity, right? Faith is conviction. But the problem is people don't even know what that word means. Okay. So we're going to deep dive into that today. And this may help you overcome the idea of anything being impossible. All right. And I'll give you another really easy NLP technique. Okay. So make sure that you stay on to actually hear what that will be. But I have talked about it before, but I think it's super important to use this one in context of using the word faith and impossibility together. Because again, if you've used faith in the same sentence as impossible, you don't understand faith, right? And so it's super key to recognize why you're asking what you're asking, because that means what you've done is you've already given too much power to what you think is impossible. And most of what you think about in terms of how you define the impossible is not based on your current concept of self. It's based on your former concept of self, your past experiences, your mental schemas, right? Your beliefs about how the world operates, and so on and so forth, that are all grounded in a past version of yourself. Okay. And so I really, really need you to be fully aware of what's going on here. So when you come to this idea of faith and you understand it as conviction, Okay, what is somebody who is convicted, right? If somebody's convicted in a court of law, what are you supposed to do? You're supposed to prove why they're convicted. Okay, you have to come up with evidence for why they are convicted. And to me, this is a better way to understand conviction, because people are like, I know the basic of the idea, meaning I've got to be convinced or self-persuaded. Well, this is the kind of idea, and I'm turning this into a tip and strategy for you. Okay, so think of the word conviction as the way in which we understand, like when we try to criminalize someone's behavior, whether it be murder, stealing something from a store, breaking and entering, whatever it is, stealing old shoes. It doesn't matter. I don't judge thieves. All right. So again, conviction is better understood as what happens in a court of law, okay? And so what happens in a court of law is that you yourself have to prove why you're convicted, why you're convinced, okay? So if this criminal is in a court of law, right, and we know that imunya is the Hebrew word for, right, for faith, and faith is different from belief, and go check out my live event from yesterday on why they're different, right? Because faith leads to belief, not one and the same, okay? But faith is a form of conviction, but conviction in a court of law means you have to prove that there is a story and a person and an event. All of those things, a story, a person, and an event. SPE, okay? Story, person, and event. If you're listening to this after I've recorded it, put SPE, right? Story, person, event. That's what it means to be convinced. That's what it means to use faith to overcome the impossible. Because right now, your current story is saying it's not. That means the current person in your story, which is you, is saying it's not. Then there's an event. Where is the event happening? Within. So what's an event that you can create from the first person that will prove to you that you do have faith? What's the event, the moment for you, right, that will actually prove to you, I know beyond a shadow of a doubt, if I repeat this over and over and over enough times, that I will be convinced that I have this thing, or that this person's back in my life, or that the house is mine, that the car is mine. And dude, this can happen so quickly, right? Especially when you get really good at this. What's the event? Right? So again, when you're in a court of law, you're also coming up with evidence. So look for evidence in your, well, I don't care how small it is. If you're looking for abundance because you're trying to manifest more money, well, then look at blades of grass. Look at how abundant the leaves are on the tree, right? You can go as small as you want. You can go as big as you want, right? And so it's the art of looking at the world as a world of possibility rather than the world of impossibility, right? And so that is the major difference. When you look at like, okay, where's this money coming from? I don't even have to worry about where the money's coming from because I'm abundant. Because look at me, I'm surrounded by abundance, right? Or let's say you're trying to heal yourself. Okay, so then remember, Neville says use selective hearing. What does that mean? Well, then I also hear it to mean selective seeing, right? Selective interpreting, and so on and so forth. So what that means is, like, if I'm healing myself and I'm trying to heal myself, that I train myself over time to only see that. So even when I see, let's say if I'm out and I see somebody who has like an injured knee, or they have one of those black things over their knee, and I'm trying to manifest health, then I'm like, oh wow, they're actually out rehabilitating themselves. So rather than like, oh my gosh, he's injured, right? And that'll tell you where your brain is anyways, in terms of your beliefs and states, right? Is that you are molding and shaping. So you're creating evidence. So this is what you're doing when you're learning how to use faith. You are creating evidence on the ongoing, daily, moment by moment practice, right? Of actually only training your senses to see what you want to see that will hook up with the stronger story. Because remember, what do you need for faith? You need a story, a person, and an event. Now, keep in mind, when I say person, I'm talking about your future version who has your house, has the spouse, has fame, has the jet-setting lifestyle, has the beach lifestyle, owns an island, whatever it is that you want, right? And so again, remember, to have faith, you need those three components. And that's what I think is super key. You need the S, the P, and the E. And I know I'm repeating this because remember, neuroscience shows that our brain loves repetition. So again, you need the story, which means right now, if you're in lack, you want to get rid of that story. But how do you do that? You tell a stronger story, right? But how do you tell a stronger story? You need the other two components. A person, which is you, but you as the new person, not as the old person. Okay. And then you have the event, which is how would I live my life in here if this were true? Okay. So that's what you need. But then throughout the day, you're also still corroborating. You're collecting evidence. Okay. And that's what loyalty, that's what faith is. And I talked about this yesterday, right? Loyalty to the unseen. But the unseen is seen here. Okay. So when you're being loyal, like to a king and queen, and I know I'm repeating myself from yesterday, but like when you're being loyal, okay, you are collecting all of the different tools, strategies, and things that you already have, like your emotions, your thoughts, your perception, your feelings, right? All of these kinds of things are tools and strategies. And I would even argue action in the stage world as well. All of these are creating a cohesive new person that's living a new event called life. But now you're living the future event now. Okay. So again, that's what faith is. And I think it's a better understanding to really grasp that's what it is, right? And, and I can even go deeper into the Kabbalah here about faith. And some of what I've been kind of deep diving into is actually from the Kabbalah understanding as well. And one day I probably will go into the Kabbalah. I know Neville was big on that. I've taken like 3.5, 4 years on the course itself. And there's super, super awesome insights as well into the mysticism side of this that I think would actually be helpful to people. But again, so remember, the other thing about impossibility, okay, like I said at the very beginning of this, if you will come at something as if it's impossible, what you've done is you've created a scientific law that does not exist. You've created a form of gravity that you say that can't be challenged. Okay. Now, the reason why I say that and why am I using gravity? Because I have this technique that I'm teaching my clients and it's called gravitational recall. Okay. And I'm going to teach you this very early on because, I think it's kind of like slow today with people. So gravitational recall, and check out my video on it because I talk a little bit about it more. And I think I just called it gravitational recall. But gravity is always misunderstood. We think gravity is pulling you down, and that's not a very helpful scientific understanding. Even though there's some truth to that, it's actually better understood as gravitation is actually making space for an object. Okay, so it's almost like this is actually probably a better way to understand this. It's kind of a fun way. It's like when you go to a trampoline park, those things that you bounce up and down, right? Or even if you're on a trampoline. Right? Imagine a trampoline, and what it's doing is when you're jumping down, especially if you have like an older trampoline, you can actually see your weight jumping into the actual thing. And if somebody looked underneath the trampoline while you're jumping, they would see the imprint of your weight and your legs or whatever it is being like not pushed through, obviously, because then you'd be injured. But then you could actually see the expansion, or you could see the flexing of the actual fiber. Right? That the actual trampoline is made of. Okay. That's actually a better way to understand gravity, right? And it's just holding space for what it is, right? And that's what your attention does. It creates gravity pockets all across reality. You are holding space for those things that you believe. So then if you keep holding space for impossible, you've quite literally used your mind and memories to create space in your reality for the impossibility. This is why both Neville and Joseph Murphy say never concede or never agree to loss, because that means you've created a gravitational recall. And I'm going to explain the recall part now, because this is actually a technique, okay? Is the actual ability to recall only those things, okay? And so you're training your mind to not do that. You don't want to do that. Okay. And I feel like I'm Charlie Brown with this one strand of hair. But anyhow, so the recall part is what? Your memories. Okay. So your memories are whatever you think you are, by the way. So all neuroscience points to the fact that basically humans and their identity are a bundle of repeated memories. There's more to it, and there's more neurotransmitters released, all of this kind of stuff. But the basis of human identity is really just a handful of repeated memories. And we keep practicing them and repeating them and telling other people about them, writing them in books and articles and, and saying, I learned this from this event that's 4 years ago. And there's nothing wrong with that. But the more that we spend energy focusing on all these old stories is the more that we're going to end up repeating them over and over and over. Okay, we'll have our own perpetual Groundhog's Day, mentally speaking. Well, not only mentally, you'll actually show up in the stage world, right? And I like calling this the stage world, one, because I love Shakespeare, but then two, because we are playing out the roles, which are called beliefs, right? Which is our states. Neville calls those states, right? And so we are being the state. And so, with this idea of recall, what we do is if you're constantly recalling, oh, well, the reason why I think this is impossible is because I have a memory of something that didn't happen or go my way. So then guess what? You're now creating gravity or gravitational holes in reality that makes space for that to be true of other things in your life, not just one area, right? And so this is why, again, both Neville and Joseph do not concede to loss. Okay, that means give it a different meaning. Give it something that is more powerful. If you have a 3P that is in the life of your SP, all this friggin' jargon that we use, right? If you have a third person showing up in the life of your special person that you're trying to manifest, right? Give it different meaning. Be like, oh, they're just being visited by their cousin. Or, oh, that was just an image of them and their best friend from college. Like, you don't give it meaning that is loss. Right? So let's say somebody tries to take money from you in some way, shape, or form, like they try to sue you or whatever it is, right? And even if it goes through, okay, be like, you know what? I gained something. I gained insight. Okay, I gained what not to do next time. I gained, right? It's like what Thomas Edison said, right? I didn't fail 2,000 times. I learned 2,000 ways not to do something, right? And so that's how you do not concede to loss. You look at everything as a gain, right? And so another way of saying that, and I really don't like cliches. I absolutely hate stereotypes. So did the ancient Hebrews, right? Why? Because it cheapened life, right? But the idea is that, when you're looking at these scenarios, when you're looking at these things in your life, okay, that you are more powerful than your circumstance. Okay. And so when you're comparing faith to impossible circumstances and so on and so forth, you're saying faith isn't strong enough. You're saying you're not strong enough. You're saying God or your imagination isn't strong enough. You're saying love is weak, right? And the problem is that we're the one who is making love weak with our beliefs. Right. And so the more that we concede, the more that we give up, the more that we yield to some power outside of us, the more that we give that power away. Okay. And I don't like talking in abstract concepts because what do I mean by power? And I think this will help you with faith and there's actually more to faith. And I'm probably only going to do because remember, everything for me is layered. There's no such thing as a word that has one meaning. It's always 3 or 4. And the same with Neville. I don't think I've ever read any of Neville's work where most of his language means one thing. And most people read it as one thing. They read him too literally. And he himself said that he is a metaphorical writer, right? And he's like Nietzsche, right? He writes in aphorisms, okay? Which means you're supposed to look at his phrases as things that invite you to go deeper. Same with the Bible, right? They were written by poets, not historians, right? So, again, let's go to understanding as faith as power. But the problem is most people are going to think of power as like, ooh, I'm like, this is the most powerful person in the world because they're in a high position. So now we're thinking of power as hierarchical. Check this out. If you keep thinking that power is hierarchical, what does that mean for you? That means you will have doubts because you will. I promise you. And I don't mean as being dark or negative because I'm an actual, my cup is full, not even half full, but just full, right? But Neville says you get doubt and you get satisfaction, right? And that doesn't mean that you have to live in doubt. That doesn't mean when doubt shows up, you accept it, right? Any of those things aren't necessities. But when you understand that, like I just said, gravitational recall, and I'm going to explain that a little bit more as well, and then we're going to close with an NLP technique. But when you understand that faith is what did we say faith was conviction. But how do we turn that into a technique? As understanding that the word conviction doesn't just mean I'm convinced, right? That is what it means, but I think my understanding of it, I think, is a little bit more helpful because it actually breaks it down into a technique, which is I'm now going out in the world and I'm convicting or convincing myself that this is the case, like a court case when you convict somebody, right? So I'm using it negative and positive because the negative will make sense of the positive understanding of the first level of faith. Remember, faith is like triple level, right? Yes, thermal chill. Yeah. So even that word, by the way, thermal chill, and thank you for bringing that up, is extremely layered. There's like 4 different understandings to the word persistence, right? And so a lot of people use that word and they're like, oh, just persist and just keep going, right? Like some like dirty bumper sticker, like that was like bought at like some football game of like a high schooler, right? And that is not what it means. There's actually more power and layer to that actually turns it into a technique, right? Because yes, when you hear the word, you're going to hear persist, but Neville gets it from the Bible, which means to persevere. And I'm going to go into that in a second because you brought it up. So 1, welcome to the channel. Much love to you. If you're looking for coaching, jump on. There's an email in my bio, all that good stuff. We have packages. We do weekly Bible studies that do not look at the Bible as a Bible, right? And weekly themes that jump into Neville's work and manifestation and limiting beliefs and all this kind of stuff, but all backed by my training in Harvard neuroscience. So, back to this, right? So again, when you look at faith as power and you think it's hierarchical, that means someone will always eventually have more power than you. You can't be defining, right? You can't be defining power as hierarchical. Because when you come at power as hierarchical, that means you can lose it. And what does Neville and Joseph Murphy say? Right? That you never give the loss. And again, there are no coincidences. To me, that's actually multi-layered as well, right? There is no this, because some of those end up being like bumper stickers. So like, for example, I'm a writer on Reddit in the Neville Goddard, like a stream of writing there, and loads of people will give other people advice of like, oh, well, they're like 3Ds doesn't matter, just persist. That's not very helpful because people don't understand it, right? And so I think we need to grasp what it is. And like in that Exodus verse that I talked at the beginning, where they were actually really like in Exodus, right, where they were saying, well, in our doing, we begin to understand. That means the more that you embody the state, the more that you become the person, the more that you become the thing, right? You actually begin understanding. But even understanding in the Hebrew means a multi-layered idea as well. And one day I'll actually go into that, but not today because there's just too much multi-layer stuff going on already. So again, faith, first and foremost, is a form of, one, it is always above the impossible, right? Always above it, right? But then also it is a form of power, but power is not hierarchical. So power is more understood as electricity, right? And so, now, by the way, I love that you're here as well. But I will say right now you're sharing like kind of bumper sticker understandings, which is great, by the way, great. This is what I learned when I first started. But again, most of the time, even when I would write this stuff, people would be extremely confused by that, right? And I'm coming from the Hebrew, which has informed the whole like Bible, right? So imunya is a 4-layered idea within scripture, which is what we call faith, right? And so again, very cool that you're sharing this, right? Hey X, how you doing? Welcome, 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 right? And so again, when we're talking, and by the way, Thermal, I'm so glad you're here, by the way. But again, what I want to get at though, is that when you have faith in comparison to the impossible, you've already said the impossible is more powerful than faith. right? So again, if you go back to the beginning of this video, I break it down a little bit more detailed, okay? And why when you use the word impossible, you're using it scientifically as if it's a scientific law that can never be challenged, right? And that's the problem, okay? But now we're actually kind of deconstructing faith, and I'm kind of keeping you updated, X, as well as to where we are, and trying to also update thermal chill as well. So again, make sure that you go back to the beginning, because I talk about why even scientific laws and understanding them as unchanging is really not helpful. And we talk about gravity and quantum theory as well. So, but faith is multi-layered. So again, like I said, faith is what? Faith is multi-layered, but it's emunya, right, from the Hebrew. And the first part of faith is that it is something that is a perceptive lens, but on top of that, it is a power, but power is not hierarchical, because if you think of power as hierarchical, and I know I'm repeating myself, but if you think of power as hierarchical, right, then you have the opportunity to lose it. So power is something that we all have, right? Power is creative, right? And, oh, that's a good question, Zara. By the way, welcome to the channel. And I will answer that. And so power is better understood. Think of it like this, as your hand, which is actually, this works with the ancient symbology or the ancient symbol, like meaning of power. So when you read hand in scripture, it's power as a metaphor for power. So God's hand is the imagination power, right? And so for me, you have to understand that power, if you look at it this way, is always diffused and distributed, right? It is not hierarchical. There's no top down, right? It doesn't matter what position you are. It doesn't mean you're powerful. That's yet another way of saying that, right? Everybody has power, and it's distributed like your 5 fingers are a distribution of your wrist and your arm, right? And so it is connected. And it is diffused that way, which means it is actually broken up and separated out into your experience, right? Through faith. But faith is a power. So when you are saying, oh, there's something impossible, guess what you're doing? Nope, there is nothing, right? There is no faith. So you are closing up your power, and you are saying there is no diffusion happening. There is no power happening, right? So you are literally conceding to what both Joseph Murphy and Neville are adamant that we do not do, which is you are conceding or agreeing to loss, okay? So that means you can lose. That's yet another way of saying, can I use faith to manifest the impossible? Really what you're saying is, I don't want to lose, okay? Well, then don't lose. Right? And again, I know that sounds much easier, and that actually takes me to Zara's question. Okay. And by the way, if you're new here, welcome. I'm doing these daily. I am a coach backed by trained Harvard neuroscience. You know, if you're looking for coaching, jump on, hit me up here. There's an email there, my Wondr Emporium coaching@gmail.com. I have a website. I have a private Discord group that's free with loads of stuff that I'm constantly doing. Right. So again, yeah, so thermal, see, that's a good piece of advice, but most of what I'm seeing here is very like we're quoting stuff from Neville's work, right? And that's great, but Neville is giving us his work or his experience of the law. One man, by the way, his experience of the law, but at the same time, why? So I'm a why person, right? Because I'm a scientist by trade. Okay, so for me, when we come and quote Neville, and we just quote Neville, I think what's happening is the brain doesn't fully grasp it. Hence why even if you read Reddit articles, Facebook articles, WhatsApp articles from people who are like, why after 10 years this isn't working, right? Because people aren't understanding that this is actually not simple. This is where I think people are like, no, it's really simple. Yeah, but here's the thing. If it was, why did Neville take almost 6 to 6.5 years to learn it himself? Right? Not to mention all of the time that he spent with the Rosicrucians, all of these other things that he himself experienced, right? And so, yes, it can be simple, but it depends. So let's go to Zara's question, okay? So, right, and, you know, and there are techniques, by the way, I can help you with, X, like full on, like, so yeah, there are techniques, by the way. Hey, Musique, there are techniques that I can actually help you with from behavioral science that can actually make it easier for you to stay awake. So you end up having, right, Let's go back to Zara. And Zara, I actually had a live. I think it actually was yesterday. So make sure you check out the live where I talk about triggers. And it was like 90% psychology. Okay. And the triggers that we have are stories. And like I said, at the first level of faith, when you understand it, right, is that you are basically a story with a person and an event, and that you need to fully always be actively day in and day out, right, finding like conviction, because faith in Hebrew is, right, is what? Faith is a conviction, a self-conviction, right? And so what that means is that you are building out a case to be convinced. That's what you're doing. You're not just saying, I am. That's why Neville was against just rote, or what it means, like robotic affirmations. Because the robotic affirmations you could do for 20 years and still not manifest. Okay? But you have to be convinced. But if you're saying, I am rich, and then you constantly look for evidence why you're not, then that's why it's taken 20 years, right? And so you have to be active. And so that's why I was saying faith is more of like better understood as a criminal conviction, like convicting a criminal in court, because you are actually being loyal to finding ways in which you are already that person. And so again, no matter how small it is, and I'm going to go back to the example I used at the beginning of this, right? So again, loads of repetition today. I'm okay with that because I'm a neuroscientist, so that I understand, hey, right, that repetition is the way that we learn. Okay. So when you are telling these stories, you have to go out and look for evidence. And that evidence is looking in your environment, looking in here, looking at your emotions. Everything that you have in this life is a resource. And so you use that resource to tell the story with the new person, not with the old person. Thank you for the likes as well. That's amazing. And with the event, you create the event right here. Okay. And so that's what the first level of faith is. It's a story with a person, with an event. The events are in here, okay? So the story is the story that you want to give up with a stronger story. And you tell the new story, and it has to be stronger than the old story, right? So, that's what Neville calls your inner conversations. That means you're protecting, guiding, shaping, right? Forming all of the thoughts that you're thinking out throughout your whole day. And you're now creating a cohesive, and one day I'll talk about correlation, right? And Neville actually talks about correlation because he loves Spinoza, who was like one of the guys who talked about correlation and assimilation and all these other concepts. And we're going to go through his work one time and deep dive into Spinoza's work and why Neville loved him so much, right? And so, yeah, so stronger does mean like feeling and conviction and emotion, but be detailed. Like, have fun with this. Like, a lot of people take this way too seriously, meaning their situation too seriously. And I get that there are serious situations, but when you give them so much power and you're like, I've got to be the manifester of the year. Like, this is not what it's about. There are no such thing as the manifester Olympics, right? And for good reason, because it's a process. Even when you drill down into the word for faith, it means process, right? And so that means you're learning how to have more faith, okay? Yeah, if you want to make fun of it, just to make fun of it, and it diffuses the seriousness of it, right? I think it can help, but I think what meditation does, so like in Neville's radio lectures, he doesn't talk about meditation in the way that we understand it, as in we clear out our thoughts. By the way, you can never do that. But I mean, like that, basically he understands, like he uses meditation, and this is him sharing his own practice, as him guiding and controlling his own thoughts. So he uses it to figure out where his thoughts are going, to bring them back. So check out his, and if you can't get it, just remind me or join the Discord group, or get a hold of me on Reddit, or get a hold of me on my email and say, hey, can you send over the PDF of his radio lectures? Because in meditation, he talks about his own process, pretty detailed. And he basically says that in his own process, he doesn't sit there and try to clear out thoughts. He actually uses it to learn how to guide and control his thoughts, right? Which I think is a pretty cool way of doing it, because I think we have this like, It is mindfulness. Yeah. I mean, I think you can probably call it mindfulness, right? But whereas meditation, the way that we've understood it and the way it's become like a consumer way of like, hey, I've got to do this so I can get more stuff, right? That's not meditation, right? Meditation is just deep breathing, right? And centering, right? Yeah, so thermal, yeah, 100%. Like, there's a verse in the Bible that says, like, if a child asks his father for bread, will he give him a snake? Like, yeah, and Neville says, by the way, Neville says go big. Like, Neville is like, don't be thinking small. So, and this is what I challenge my clients, and I show them how to do this with like behavioral science and techniques to do this, is where you go from small to big. But the problem is, the reason why people stay small is because they're still being the old person in the old story. So then, and that's the thing, by the way, that I need to really get this out today as well. When you start measuring what is big, when you use the word impossible, you're still measuring from the old story. Let me say that again. When you start asking, can I use faith to manifest the impossible? Right when those questions leave your lips, you're still measuring what you desire from the old state of thinking, believing, feeling, and perceiving, right? Because from the old state, everything looks impossible. You look like the victim, right? And like I said before, if you look at things, right, and you collapse all possibilities, okay, into one, right? Which there's really, if you're in the state of, hey, dude, I'm a fucking awesome manifester, right? Then there's always possibilities, more than one. But if you're looking from a perspective of lack, you're going to collapse the multiplicity, the multiverse into one. And that means you're only going to be able to play the role of that person because you've now modified what is endless possibilities into one possibility. So then, like I said earlier, if you are looking at your situation and you only see one way out, then you are not looking at yourself as God. You're looking at yourself as a victim. And those are two very different ways of seeing the world, right? And so, you know what I mean? Yeah, they are. Yeah, X, they are. When I get I actually have my website up, but when I do have it like fully up, I'm going to have all of his stuff there as well. But again, and I said this yesterday, I'm friends with, the guy who owns, coolwisdombooks.com. Go check that out. Like his friggin' website is just massive library of not just Neville content, but loads of Neville content stuff. Right. And, and I do want to answer your question, Thermal, as well. But again, when you look at the impossible, what's happened is that you've latched onto a memory that has told you whatever you're looking at is impossible. So this is where this goes back to gravitational recall that I was talking about 20 minutes ago about, right? As in, memories are a form of gravity, and our misunderstanding of gravity as this thing that pulls you down, which is extremely bad scientific understanding. Yes, there's a surface level truth to that definition, but it actually creates space for this thing. So when you rely on old memories of seeing things, whether it be traumatic memories, limiting memories, this will actually help Zara as well, right? When you depend on those, you define yourself by those. You create a person who lives by those memories, okay? And so what's ends up happening though, is that you create gravitational recall. What that means is, and this is just a concept that I've come up with, and also if you join the group or if you join my coaching packages, I'll actually walk you through the whole thing. Because I'm only giving surface level stuff here. And so like basically, what's happening is every single time you rely on an old memory, you rely on an old person, right? Because the old person is relying upon those old memories, and you repeat those old memories with the old emotions, okay? But then what that does is it creates pockets of possibility in your universe, in the way in which you experience things. It forces your perceptive lens to be this small, right? And by the way, and I don't know if I have time today because my battery's low, but basically what happens is when you do that, when you do this, when there's this, meaning this much possibility, and you do this, all you're doing is you're training your mind, and this is the neuroscience and the psychology behind this, to always be in trauma zone thinking. That's it. You've done it. Like when you create tunnel vision, I don't care. Like, yes, you can do hyper focus or flow. That's positive tunnel vision, right? But I'm talking about the negative tunnel vision. Then that means you've locked yourself into seeing the world through the lens of trauma. If you continue that, according to neuroscientific research, you then create victim mentality. You also can create eventual indifference, which means you like, I don't care. I don't know what to do. I have no idea. I don't feel like I can do anything. And then so what do? You tell them the story because you don't know any way out of it, because what you've done is you haven't broadened your perspective. So what can you do? You could do simple things like get out of the room, go do something different, go do one thing that the future version of you that has the thing that you want would do. It doesn't matter how big, how small, go do an action, go perform it, go dance in your room, all like cry, go listen to music, go get yourself out of the circuit of thinking of lack and limitation, right? Because the more that you do that and the more that you get really good at this, right? Because I think people really kind of, and I used to think like this. When I started out in manifestation, I used to think, oh, I can only rely on manifestation to get me out of things. No, you're still human. That's okay. So if you have to go do human things to knock yourself out of like, I'm in like tunnel vision, right? Go do that. Do you understand? Like, go do that. Go actively be involved, right, in actually making sure that you do things. Now, what I encourage people to do is come up with a list of things, right? So go and, thank you, is go and create a list of things that you would love to do. Okay, so I'm working with a client right now, and I was saying, if you were that person already, what would you do? So let's say you are a dancer or you want to be a dancer. Okay, well then what would you do today? Okay, not wait till tomorrow, it's now. I was thinking about this today before I jumped on. If you really take Neville at his word, you're always living your best life. Because the moment's now. Like the moment isn't tomorrow. The moment isn't when the money arrives. The moment isn't when the SP arrives. The moment isn't when your parents start loving you better. The moment isn't when you have the house. The moment isn't when you have the car. The moment isn't when, right? The moment is now. You're always living in the house. You're always living with the best parents. You're always living with your best friends. You're always living, right? You always have a supportive network, right? And so you are always living your best life now. Right? You're never waiting, because when you wait and you manifest like more opportunity for waiting. So again, when you're asking the question, is there enough faith to overcome the impossible? What you're saying is, I'm waiting. I want to wait. And I think I deserve to wait, right? No, you deserve the best life today and tomorrow, and you have to embody it. And there's loads of scripture I can go through, and that's what we're doing. By the way, it's super cool. I'm getting loads of mileage behind starting this Bible study. So if you want to join, it's only $35 when we meet. And I usually I'll give you some sort of workbook, or we may meet together and you're like, no, I don't want workbooks. I just want more group time, whatever it is. And we'll have a Q&A, all this kind of stuff. Get in touch about that, because we're gonna start the first one soon. And you guys actually get to vote as well on what we do the next time that we meet. And yes, it is not a historical document. It's a psychological one, and it teaches you how to manifest. But yeah, so I could keep going, right? So I wanted to really, really answer this, but the last thing I want to talk about is when you hear the word impossible, right? When you hear the word impossible, there are two things that are going on. One, you have now produced what I call the tale of two inevitabilities. Okay, so yes, I know, it's from Charles Dickens' The Tale of Two Cities. But what's happened, and I talk about this in one of my other videos. I think I called it The Tale of Two Inevitabilities. So go and check out that, right? And yes, I do see your question, Thermal, and thank you for reminding me. So just keep showing it, and then I'll make sure I come back to that. So the tale of two inevitabilities is this. And watch how you do this. I challenge you to do this today. Okay, maybe this is the technique for you today, is I challenge you to do this today, okay? Watch where your brain wants to go with the story, okay? Meaning the story that you're living out today. So you go and look something happens. Do you say, oh, of course it happened that way? Meaning in the bad way. Oh, of course my car broke down. Oh, of course I got rejected. Oh, of course. Are you hearing this? Like, are you hearing it? Because that's the past story. That's the past person. But then the other person is, hey, and this is why I call it the tale of two inevitabilities. Because the future person is, of course, everything goes my way. Of course, that had to happen that way so that it could open me up to other opportunities, right? So again, Neville learned this very early on when he got fired from JCPenney. Of course that had to happen because that led to my journey being here. Of course the depression had to happen because I wouldn't be here on stage teaching this with you, right? And so you're switching the language up. By the way, this is another technique, and I've talked about this one before, but it's actually called submodalities from NLP, from neuro-linguistic programming. Okay, and I'm going to do one whole video with like 10 of these. Okay, with like it's probably gonna be 20 minutes long. The thing is that you guys are showing, the analytics are showing that you guys prefer shorter videos, so that's why I'm not doing longer videos. But like basically, when you are from the second inevitability, then your second inevitability is from the future self that sees only possibility. So then you're saying, oh, of course things always happen in my favor, right? Neville says it this way, and I'll find the quote for you, but I love it because the way that I understand it makes sense better to me. So I'm reinterpreting what he says. But he basically says, walk through life as if you have an ace in your back pocket. Take that in. Walk throughout your whole life as if you have an ace in your back pocket. That means you always have something in your favor. Always. That means the tale of the two inevitabilities is you're giving up the old inevitabilities for the new ones and saying, I always have great things. Right? And the Bible says it many, many different ways. It says how to overcome evil with good. Well, that's pictorial. And I've shared this before, but I absolutely love it. And then I want to actually answer Thermal's question from earlier. But to overcome good with evil, and I know I've shared this before, so if you've been here, you might hear this again. But again, in Hebrew, the words good and evil aren't ethical, right? They're not right and wrong. What it is one's order and one's disorder. So what's that referring to? It's referring to the order of your thoughts, right? So you are ordering or you are in disorder, right? And so the days that you're like, I feel angry and upset and I can't believe this is not working in my favor, that's evil, right? Again, not ethical, just evil. That means disorder. When you're like, dude, I'm the shit, I've got everything I wanted, blah, 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 that's good. So here's the thing, and this goes back to the tale of two inevitabilities, okay? Either of course it's bad or of course it's good. You get to determine that, right? But according to this verse, the word overcome means one is over the other, hence why it's overcoming it, right? It's the arrival of this thing that has so much power that when you use it as a tool and technique, it overcomes. By the way, naturally overcomes. You don't effort it. By you just doing this, it inherently overcomes, okay? And so it brings new life, right? And you can even use that word come sexually, which means it's a metaphor for things that can bring in new life. So, and the reason why I bring that up is because Neville does, right? He talks about that, right? The seed and all this kind of stuff. So, and also I want you to get the visual here, all right? So again, good, and remember, Hebrews write pictorially. They don't write literally. They're poets. Okay, so when they say the good overcomes the evil, they're writing with a picture in mind. And the beautiful picture that I've done in the study in the Kabbalah and all this kind of stuff that keeps coming up is this one. How do you overcome evil? How do you overcome evil is by telling good. So it's like somebody who's on the side of the road and all they see is good. And here's the better picture for you to understand that verse. And I'll probably show this again and again. But like basically what you're doing is, oh, good, good. Good, 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 good. You're not allowing evil to have any word, not even the last word. You are not allowing evil at all, or disordered thoughts, or doubt, or faith, or what ifs, right? To have the last word. That's good, that's good, that's good, that's good. That's what that verse means. You are actively, and I mean actively, this is good. This is good. So even when something supposedly bad comes into your world, that's good about it. That's good about it. That's what's good about it. That's what's good about it. Even if the only good thing that you get from it is, I've learned something about myself, about a limiting belief I have, right? That's good. That's great, because what is this about? What does Neville say this is about? This is a school. So if you don't learn, then that's not good. But if you learn, that's good. So this is saying, good. I learned something. I learned something. That's yet another way of saying, how do you overcome evil? How do you overcome limiting beliefs and thoughts? I learned this. I learned that. I learned this. I learned that. I learned this. I learned that, right? That's how you do this, okay? And again, I want you to be able to manifest stuff in 4 seconds. But what we're doing is we're getting to the root causes, the root beliefs of what is going on, okay? So let me go back because I know I'm running out of battery here. Into thermal, right? So again, so don't wait just to develop. Okay, yeah, that's good. Don't wait to develop, right? Sorry, where's thermal here? What if you manifested something 5 years ago and now you need to develop that today to push you further? Okay, so I don't know exactly what that's referring to, but in terms of what I'm kind of like interpreting your question to mean is, what if you manifested something 5 years ago and how you need it to develop that today? So what if you need to develop it today? So like, let's say a skill or something like that. I mean, I would never not develop something. Like, this is like what I said, like there's probably somebody you listen to quite a bit in the manifestation world, at least in the Neville world. Me and him have loads of conversations. And one of the things that we do, and I've shared this before, one of the things that we do is we sit and talk about our limiting beliefs, but not just sit and talk about them. We're like, how am I actively shaping these limiting beliefs every day? So I choose one every day. So I use a Notion app, and one day I'm going to show you how to use that for what's called Life iOS. But it's usually something that I usually only wait to use with my clients, and we break it down. It's like probably 2 to 3 days to actually use what I use it for. And I'm not exaggerating. Like, this is really intense stuff. So you use the Notion app. And by the way, I'm going to write a Reddit article probably today or tomorrow. And it's going to be deconstructing even modern day songs. And it's going to be showing you how to read everything in this world as a text, right? As a way in which to understand the mind. Because everything in this world is psychological, right? So watch out for that, because I'm gonna use that as a technique. So in my Notion, there's an area where I literally tear apart books. I love books. And so I've taken Moby Dick, I've taken Pinocchio, I've taken Hansel and Gretel, and I've even taken like U2 songs, yes, the band U2, right? And took it apart as a spiritual text to understand what's going on with the mind. And it's really cool because when you do that, you actually end up with more techniques and you end up with more ways of seeing the world better, right? Because then you start seeing things psychologically. And I think that's a super fun way to actually go about this as well. It's really artistic as well. And you can create new forms of poetry and all this kind of stuff and end up being like basically, Neville's new best friend because he loved Blake, who was an author, a poet, right? But yeah, so again, $1 million song and the super business idea. I am a trained musician. Okay, so again, that's awesome, by the way, and that's super cool. And please share how you did that below, right? I mean, for other people. And again, but everybody else, me, I don't get caught up on the technique. You are the technique. So the story is more for encouragement than it is to, I gotta mine this story for techniques. No. You are the technique, right? That's what it is. This is why I'm doing what I do, because I see too many people getting hyper confused, hyper traumatized by manifestation, and I don't like that, right? And you hear me say that every video because I want you to know I'm heartfelt, but then two, I am heartfelt, but then also I don't believe that you need to live life in trauma and limiting beliefs, right? And this is science. I mean, Neville says this is the science. So I'm coming at this from a science, right? And there's more I could share here, but really, really big challenge. And I've shared this before, and I've given you techniques throughout, so definitely listen back through this. But another one is one that I've shared many times before, which is the NLP one about submodalities. So it means when you hear a word, or even when you say a word, what feelings come up. So the submodalities are kind of like the small inner micro expressions that we go through and react to and define throughout our day, which means how are we reacting to certain words, and then how are we choosing those words as well. So, you want to think of words as a part of your art form, right? And so you want to choose them. So watch how you're saying I can't versus I can. Watch how you're saying I would versus I should, right? All of these kinds of things, right? X. So if feelings aren't coming up, so what? Like, I mean, this is, you don't manifest from emotions. You manifest from beliefs. You can use emotions and you can use thoughts, but neither of them manifest, right? The only reason why it seems like they do is because you have a strong enough story, and then the emotion is the fuel that keeps them going, right? And so that's what's happening. And that's what the Bible means when it says, if two or more are in agreement. It's talking about your emotions with your beliefs, right? There I am, right? There I am also, which means, hey, something's being created, right? Because there I am also is referring to the I am. There I am is also, or Jesus, right? And so that is ultimately what you want to, yes, you can use emotion to manifest. And that's why I give you guys the whole knobs, right? The NLP technique, right? In your pictures. But you don't need it. And sometimes when you're not feeling, right, you have to ask, if you want feeling, for example, then you have to ask, hey, why isn't this thing coming up? And that's usually probably because of a memory or a belief that you have accepted as true. And so you've disempowered yourself. So I would ask first, hey, is there something here that's keeping me from this feeling? But I would also like have a part two where it's like, if I want to manifest this, I don't need to conjure up emotions. I love to, but I love happy emotions. And I'm not toxic positive, right? It's just, I like it. I'm a happy person, so I love feeling good, right? But you don't have to. I don't think it's a rule. You know what I mean? That's awesome, man. Thank you so much for sharing that, by the way. Yeah, so thank you. So again, NLP, back to NLP, and then I'm going to close, right? So again, submodalities, you can look it up. How do you use submodalities? Or if you want more help, join my coaching program. I offer different packages. We have group packages, individual packages. We have one that's pretty awesome. And that if you end up going for like package number 3, it is the highest package, but then you actually get access to all of my other stuff, which we do weekly, like deep dives into Neville's work. We get like, Bible studies, which you get free access to. All of this kind of stuff, right? And then also group calls. So check that out. Get in touch, wondremporiumcoaching.com. But again, to make sure you have the right spelling, it's on my bio here, all of this kind of good stuff. So again, check out your submodalities. Really what that means is watch how you're saying things when you're talking about them, okay? So again, thank you all for jumping on. Thank you for being here. Thank you for participating. Thank you for being awesome. Please, again, continue coming back. Check out my other videos. Leave comments there. Tell your friends about it. And if you're looking for somebody to come and do a workshop, I can do that as well. So, and I'm also opening up the second part of this business, which is for business owners, entrepreneurs. All of the fees are way higher, but that's just because I'm working with entrepreneurs, and like VPs of huge Fortune 500 companies. So, get in touch if you're interested in that. But yeah, thank you all for being here. Thank you for supporting and share this video today. It should be up hopefully by today. And go check out my other ones. And I've been doing live events every day, and I'll probably going to do one tomorrow. So make sure that you're around. It's usually about 10 to 12 my time, which is PST. So thank you all for being here. If there's a better time, let me know below. Email me. Get me on. Get like on the free Discord and DM me there. And there should be a link also on my bio about the free Discord. Yes, it does end up timing out. So let me know if it does. So again, thank you all for being here. Much love. Make sure you listen back through. And thank you all for your great comments. Manifest well today, and I will see you all soon. Much love, everybody.